Today we're taking a nostalgic journey back in time to explore the best vintage CB radios, a staple of communication in the past. These devices, often overlooked in our digital age, were once at the forefront of technology and community connectivity. I've delved deep into the world of classic CB radios, examining their features, build quality, and the unique charm that made them so popular. My focus is on presenting you with an honest and comprehensive review, highlighting why these vintage gems still hold a special place in the hearts of enthusiasts. We'll be showcasing 3 standout models, each with its own story and a testament to the era they represent. From the days when silicon transistors were cutting edge to the aesthetic shifts from the 70s to the 80s, these CB radios are more than just communication tools. They're pieces of history. Join me in rediscovering these timeless classics as we appreciate their design, functionality, and the nostalgia they invoke. Number 3. Browning LTD CB Radio. Browning LTD is a 23-channel CB radio that showed up in 1977. The radio arrived shortly before the change in CB radio channels to 40. The availability of more channels and options affected its popularity a bit, but the LTD remains one of the best-made CB radios of the era. In its description, Browning made it clear that this was a high-tech piece. It used only the most modern silicon transistors. All that might seem trivial now, but it was quite a leap back then. This device employed 1 FET, 2 ICs, 61 diodes, and 39 transistors for general operation. An additional 5 transistors would be called upon for advanced duties intended for regulation and compression. That description might not seem remotely impressive in today's world, but it was quite a feat back then, and the manufacturers made use of this technology to the fullest. Browning LTD had a double super heterodyne receiver with noise blanking circuitry. The careful use of circuitry gave it quite impressive transmit and receive capabilities with great audio quality. Browning LTD was a 23-channel CB radio with SSB capabilities, which gave it a total of 69 usable channels. There are 23 AM channels, 23 on the upper sideband, and another 23 on the lower sideband. Thanks to the double super heterodyne receiver and good construction quality, the audio quality remained good on all channels. It worked on the old Class D of the Citizen radio service, which falls on the 11-meter band. Just like today, that would require an FCC license to operate. For reference, modern CB radios in the 10-meter band don't require an FCC license. Managing all these features came down to the few knobs placed at the face of the radio. A large knob on the right side of the device turned through channels, while 3 smaller knobs handled volume, modulation, AM, USB, LSB, and Delta. All of these had a gold-plated color trim. Why? Because it was the 70s. The appearance and style of this CB radio is quintessentially retro. The shiny gold trim knobs and dials, the wood accent panels, and the casing all give it that classic 70s look. You won't find the microphone connector at the front of this radio. Instead, it goes at the side, quite close to the faceplate. There are 2 tiny buttons at the front of the radio, one to activate the noise blanking circuitry, while the other switches between the CB radio and PA system. A nice meter with lighting completes the look and style of the Browning LTD CB radio. Overall, Browning LTD was a very capable and well-made CB radio with remarkable features and quality construction. While the Browning Golden Eagle series is the most talked about from its heyday, classics like the LTD still managed to carve a niche for themselves. Number 2. Cobra 148. Cobra 148 CB radios enjoy an almost legendary status, sometimes to the extent of being named the best CB radio ever. Though there are several variants of this model, the Cobra 148 GTL AM and SSB CB radio represents the best it has to offer. The appearance and design of this radio is a classic. You will still see modern CB radios inspired by that cool retro look. There is something of this radio's look in the current lineup of Cobra, Uniden, Galaxy, and others. This design has stood the test of time. While Cobra stopped producing the Cobra 148 GTL some years ago, the interface has been around for almost 40 years now, starting with the Cobra 148 radios of the early 80s. In some part, that's likely inspired by the intuitiveness of this design. The controls remain easily accessible and can be worked without staring at the CB radio. Simply put, you don't have to take your eyes off the road to work this radio. A CB radio that was on the market for so long obviously received some updates. However, all variants managed to keep intact the intuitiveness of the controls and the performance of the transceiver. This was a full 40-channel CB radio with full SSB, USB, and LSB. There was barely any struggle with drift, and the transceiver worked wonderfully with great audio. The presence of a noise limiter circuit, A&L, worked well in keeping the quality of transmitted audio. The front of the radio shows controls that most of us would be very familiar with. A small digital display to the right shows the channel number, while an S meter with lights takes its place to the top left corner. Between these two displays, there's room for a few buttons like NB, A&L, tone, PA, CB, SSB, and calibration. The exact type of switches could change between model variants, but the combination was, and remains, largely similar. The bottom row had a microphone connector and a variety of knobs. Amongst these, the largest was the channel selector placed right below the channel number display. Others managed functions like volume and squelch, brightness of the display, and dynamic. Overall, the Cobra 148 series, and especially the Cobra 148 GTL, represent iconic CB radios with amazing features and quality performance. The interface and design of this influential line of CB radios remains popular to this day. The Cobra 148 radios were popular for several years, and their influence can be seen clearly in modern CB radios like the Cobra 25 LTD and Cobra 29 LTD. Number 1. President Washington CB Radio Base Station. Launched in the early 80s, President Washington was a solid-state CB radio base station. Nowadays, all devices are expected to be solid-state, but it was relatively new back then, with transceivers switching from tubes to silicon-based transceivers. The base station does that 80s look very nicely. One of the things I like about these iconic vintage radios is that they're very much reminiscent and great examples of their design era and decades. The change shows not just in technology, but also in aesthetics, which is quite fascinating. It has a solid and dependable casing that looks like it can handle some rough use. The muted shades of the paint that shy away from being glossy are a nice touch. The face of the base station shows a very neat arrangement of controls and functions. There's a loud and big speaker to the top left, while a large channel control knob takes the top right. However, at the center stage is the display section, which has 3 parts. The first is an illuminated S meter in a circular design. It's fairly bright and adds some color to the otherwise monotone look of the CB radio base station. Right beside this is a digital display that shows the channel number, and below this display are 3 LEDs that light up with the corresponding mode of operation of the radio: AM, USB, LSB. All these form the top row of the base station's front. The bottom row holds connectors, buttons, and knobs for various functions. It starts with the microphone connector, then there's the headphone connector, and knobs for volume, squelch, and RF gain. A couple of buttons also show up to switch between PA-CB modes or turn the NB on-off. President Washington CB base radio base station offers 40 channels on the Citizen band and full SSB. The audio quality is decent and the performance is remarkable. Overall, President Washington base station CB radio is an excellent retro modern transceiver. I do like the design quite a lot. It's clean, unencumbered, and gives something of an elegant and stylish touch to the device. It does well on performance as well, with AM and SSB availability and good TX and RX performance. Since this is a base station from the heyday of CB radios, its range could be quite remarkable, and there would be plenty to listen to. People who used this base station at its height often have fond memories of its range and performance.